What if the biggest scandal surrounding Cookie Queens was never really the box office at all, but what happened when Meghan Markle stepped onto that stage and turned a night supposedly dedicated to 4 young girls into another conversation about herself and Harry? Because suddenly, one harmless question opened a much bigger controversy. A claim about Harry's military service was challenged. A film promoted with considerable attention struggled commercially. And then came the comparison nobody in the publicity room could have wanted. Fewer cinemas, fewer expectations, and yet a cat video compilation reportedly bringing in dramatically more money per screen. That is where this story gets uncomfortable. The 4 girls at the center of Cookie Queens are not the villains here. They filmed for years, showed up, sold their biscuits, and became the faces of a project examining girlhood, ambition, money, and the enormous commercial machine surrounding the famous Cookie campaign. Their work is separate from the celebrity controversy that erupted around the film. But when Meghan Markle appeared to promote it, the spotlight shifted. Instead of remaining entirely on the girls and the questions raised by their experience, attention began circling back toward Meghan, her husband, their involvement, and exactly what they brought to the production. And that question becomes particularly awkward because the film apparently had a complicated journey before their names became attached to it. The girls did what they were supposed to do. They participated, they appeared on camera, they helped carry the story. But then the adults entered the picture, and suddenly the conversation became much bigger than 4 young Girl Scouts selling biscuits. Critics began asking whether the celebrity involvement actually helped the documentary or whether it simply created another publicity storm around Meghan and Harry. Then came the cinema numbers. On August 7th, Cookie Queens reportedly opened in hundreds of American cinemas. That is not the tiny experimental release people might expect from an obscure documentary. According to the figures discussed in the original commentary, the film opened across 446 theaters and generated roughly $327,000 over its opening period. Divide that number across the reported screens and you get a figure of approximately $735 per cinema. And that number became the punchline, because another film opened at the same time, Cat Video Fest. A 70-minute compilation of cat videos, essentially a curated celebration of other people's cats, appeared in around 255 cinemas and reportedly brought in roughly $568,000. Suddenly, the arithmetic was brutal. Cookie Queens had substantially more screens, yet the cat compilation reportedly earned considerably more overall and dramatically more per screen. That comparison exploded online because it was so absurdly simple. You did not need to understand Hollywood financing, you did not need to understand distribution contracts, you did not need to know anything about celebrity publicity. You simply had to look at the numbers. More screens, less money, fewer screens, more money. And that was when people started asking the question that had been sitting quietly underneath the entire project: why was Cookie Queens given such a substantial theatrical release in the first place? That criticism is important because it separates the girls from the grown-up controversy. Their participation does not automatically make the project commercially successful, and their presence certainly does not guarantee that audiences will buy tickets. But the celebrity association creates expectations. If a film carries the names Meghan Markle and Harry, audiences and distributors may reasonably assume those names will generate attention. So what happened? The attention arrived. The audience apparently did not, and that distinction is devastating because publicity is supposed to create curiosity. Curiosity is supposed to create ticket sales. Ticket sales are supposed to create momentum. Yet the reported opening numbers suggested that the publicity surrounding Cookie Queens did not translate into the kind of theatrical demand many observers expected. Then another detail began attracting scrutiny: the producer credits. Nobody publicly established a definitive answer to every one of those questions, and that uncertainty became part of the controversy itself. Online speculation began suggesting that the producer credit had somehow been purchased or negotiated. But speculation is not proof, and without verified financial documentation, that claim should remain exactly what it is: speculation. Still, the absence of a clear public explanation left room for endless questions. And then there was Netflix. That detail may have been even more damaging than the box office. Because Meghan and Harry had an existing relationship with Netflix, yet according to the commentary surrounding Cookie Queens, the project did not become a Netflix release. Instead, it moved through an independent theatrical distributor. That created a fascinating contradiction. If their celebrity involvement was supposed to provide extraordinary value, why didn't the platform already associated with their biggest media projects take the film. That does not prove Netflix rejected it because of quality. It does not prove the relationship was collapsing. It does not prove the film was considered a failure. But it created a question, and once the box office numbers appeared, that question became much louder. Then came the moment that turned a commercial story into a personal one. At the screening, Meghan was asked which Girl Scout cookie best represented her personality. It should have been harmless, a throwaway question, something funny for the audience. Instead, her answer reopened an old controversy surrounding her years inside the British royal family. She chose a cookie associated with being classic, sweet, and tonal, and that word tonal was the trap. Because audiences remembered Meghan previously discussing her preference for neutral clothing and connecting her wardrobe choices with her time inside the royal family. In earlier accounts, the beige and cream wardrobe had been presented as part of a larger story about not wanting to overshadow other members of the family. Now, the explanation sounded different. She liked tonal dressing. One statement did not necessarily prove another was false. Human beings can have multiple reasons for the same decision. Personal preference can coexist with external pressure. Context changes. Memories evolve. Meghan had traveled to the Los Angeles event without him, despite both names appearing in connection with the production. That absence became another talking point. If the project was important enough for Meghan to promote personally, why was Harry missing from the promotional campaign? Was it simply scheduling? Was it a deliberate division of duties? Or was there something else happening behind the scenes? Nobody outside their circle could definitively answer that. But by this point, the pattern was becoming impossible for gossip commentators to ignore. A film about four young girls had somehow become a referendum on celebrity credibility, royal history, Hollywood influence, producer credits, and the commercial value of a famous name. And the most brutal verdict was not delivered by a commentator. It was delivered by the audience. The box office had spoken, and it had spoken in dollars. The question now was whether Cookie Queens was simply an unfortunate theatrical experiment, or whether those numbers exposed something much bigger about Meghan Markle and Harry's ability to turn attention into genuine commercial success. Because if the publicity was enormous, the names were famous, the coverage was everywhere, and the audience still stayed home, then what exactly was the celebrity power supposed to be worth? And that is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable, because the box office disappointment was only one piece of the puzzle. The deeper controversy was what Cookie Queens represented. The documentary was not merely about biscuits. It was examining girlhood, capitalism, ambition, and the money moving through a system where children become the public face of a huge commercial operation. The reported figure was staggering, roughly $800 million a year and around 200 million boxes. Yet the child selling the box receives only a fraction of the money generated. That uncomfortable financial question was already inside the documentary, sitting there waiting to be discussed. But during the promotional campaign, Meghan Markle's public focus appeared to land somewhere else. She spoke about confidence, personality, fashion, and Harry. She appeared in expensive accessories while standing before families whose children had spent their time selling cookies door to door. Critics seized on the contrast immediately. The reported $1,100 Hermes sandals and Cartier love bracelet worth more than $9,000 became symbols in the online argument, whether fairly or unfairly, because the visual message was impossible to miss. A luxury lifestyle celebrity standing in front of children participating in an organization built around selling products and raising money. Then came another uncomfortable coincidence. The same week Cookie Queens was opening, Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand was promoting another product. Suddenly, the conversation about cookies collided with the conversation about premium lifestyle goods. To critics, it looked like the entire week had become one enormous advertisement surrounding biscuits, branding, celebrity, and commercial aspiration. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Why August? Girl Scout cookie season is traditionally associated with the beginning of the year, when children are actually selling boxes and families are seeing the campaign everywhere. That makes timing critical. A documentary about cookie-selling girls arriving during the heart of the cookie-selling season could naturally benefit from public interest. Instead, Cookie Queens arrived in August, months after the central commercial moment had passed. That decision made the theatrical strategy look even stranger. If the goal was to maximize public interest, why miss the moment when the subject itself was everywhere? And then the wider Hollywood record came back into view. Commentators began listing previous projects associated with Meghan Markle and Harry and asking whether the couple had developed a recurring problem. Enormous publicity followed by limited commercial impact. Their Netflix relationship had attracted enormous attention, but individual projects had not always produced the cultural impact supporters expected. The criticism was becoming less less about one documentary and more about a pattern. That is when the producer credit controversy became especially explosive. 18 executive producers were reportedly attached to the film alongside additional co-executive producers. Meghan Markle and Harry were therefore not the sole creative force behind Cookie Queens. Their names were part of a much larger production structure, yet their celebrity status inevitably became one of the biggest talking points surrounding the release, and that created the ultimate irony. If their involvement was meant to elevate the film, why did the theatrical numbers become the headline? Why did Cat Video Fest reportedly outperform it? Why did a compilation of cat footage attract more paying customers per screen? And why did the couple's famous names fail to produce the commercial momentum people expected? Together, they create the kind of pattern gossip commentators live for, because perhaps the most damaging thing about Cookie Queens was never that it failed to become a blockbuster. Or perhaps it was that the project became a public test of whether Meghan Markle and Harry could still turn their names into commercial gold. And according to the opening weekend figures being discussed, the answer was brutally uncertain. The cameras arrived, the headlines arrived, the famous names arrived, but the audience? That was the one thing nobody could order into the cinema. And now, with the reported screen count expected to fall sharply after opening weekend, the next chapter may be even more revealing, because when the number of screens disappears, the excuses become harder to maintain. And that is when the real question begins. If the celebrity spotlight cannot fill a cinema, what exactly is that spotlight worth?